The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Tribunal stretched impossibly high above the crowded courtroom. Beings from across the known universe filled every seat, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, growls, chirps, and electronic translations. Some floated in specialized atmosphere bubbles, while others required gravity adjustments or temperature controls. The diversity was stunning, yet all eyes focused on the small figure seated at the defendant's table. Maya Torres sat perfectly, still in the oversized chair designed for much larger beings. Her feet barely touched the floor, and her hands rested motionless on the metal surface before her. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit provided by the court, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. To most observers, she looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong room. Her lawyer, a nervous creature called Finn from the Advocacy Guild, shuffled through digital files with 4 arms while occasionally glancing at his silent client. He had tried for weeks to get Maya to speak, to help with her defense, to show any reaction at all. Nothing worked. She simply stared ahead with dark, unblinking eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. The charges against her were read by the court's AI system in 17 different languages simultaneously. The destruction of military installation Omega-7. The deaths of 12,000 Dominion soldiers. The complete humiliation of their greatest champion. Each charge carried a potential sentence of life imprisonment or execution, depending on the jury's decision. Behind Maya, in the gallery reserved for Earth's diplomatic mission, Ambassador Rice watched with growing dread. She had fought for months to prevent this trial, arguing that Maya was just a 17-year-old girl who had been illegally captured and tortured. But the Dominion's political pressure was too strong, and the other species wanted answers. How had one small human caused such devastation? The prosecutor rose from his seat with fluid grace. Fourth of the Dominion stood nearly 12 feet tall, his reptilian scales shifting from deep green to aggressive red as he prepared to address the court. His species had ruled this section of the galaxy for over 1,000 years, and their military had never suffered such a defeat. Someone had to pay. "Honored judges and representatives," Vorth began, his voice amplified by the court systems. "We are here today because this creature, this human, committed acts of terrorism that shocked the civilized galaxy. She infiltrated our most secure facility, murdered thousands of our finest soldiers, and destroyed property worth billions of credits." Holographic displays materialized above the courtroom, showing the aftermath of Maya's escape. The military installation looked like it had been hit by a natural disaster. Walls were punched through with surgical precision. Blast doors had been torn from their hinges. Bodies lay scattered throughout corridors, their armor cracked and weapons broken. Maya watched the images without any visible reaction. She did not flinch when the display showed the experimental chambers where she had been held. She did not cry when it revealed the torture equipment used on dozens of human prisoners. Her breathing remained steady and controlled, as if she were watching a documentary about strangers. The defendant was captured during a routine inspection of human trading vessels, Vorth continued. Our scientists wanted to understand why humans had proven surprisingly effective in combat situations. Previous encounters with human pirates and mercenaries had shown unusual resilience and unpredictable tactics. What Vorth did not mention was that the routine inspection had been an illegal raid on civilian ships. Maya had been traveling with her family on a cultural exchange mission when Dominion forces attacked without warning. Her parents and younger brother had been killed in the initial assault, and she had been taken as a specimen for study. The prosecution's evidence was damning in its scope. Security footage showed Maya's cell before the incident. She appeared catatonic, unresponsive to stimuli, broken by months of experimentation. The scientists had tested her pain tolerance, her healing rate, her psychological responses to various stimuli. They treated her like a laboratory animal. Then came the footage from the night of her escape. The timestamp showed 23:47:12 when Champion Drex entered her cell. At 23:47:15, the camera went dark. When backup systems activated 12 minutes later, Drex was unconscious and Maya was gone. In those 12 minutes, she had somehow traveled through 15 levels of the most secure military facility in Dominion space. "This creature is not the innocent child she appears to be," Vorth declared, pointing directly at Maya. "She is a weapon disguised as a victim. Look at her now. She shows no remorse, no fear, no human emotion at all. The experiments may have revealed what she truly is." Maya's court-appointed psychologist, Dr. Watts, had written extensively about her condition. Severe trauma had triggered what humans called selective mutism, but her brain scans showed unusual activity. Instead of the chaos typically associated with psychological damage, her neural patterns displayed an almost mechanical precision. Every stimulus was processed, cataloged, and prepared for. The defense would argue that Maya was simply a traumatized child who had acted in self-defense. But as Finn looked at his client, he wondered if that was entirely true. In weeks of preparation, she had never once acknowledged his presence. She ate when food was provided, slept when lights dimmed, and moved when directed, but always with the same calculated efficiency. Other species in the gallery whispered among themselves. The academe delegation took detailed notes, their 6 eyes, recording everything simultaneously. The warrior clans of the Iron Scale Coalition watched with barely concealed anger, still unable to believe their champion had been defeated. The peaceful traders of the Harmony Collective seemed genuinely confused by the whole situation, but it was the older species, the ones who had survived multiple galactic conflicts, who watched Maya with the most concern. They recognized something in her absolute stillness, in the way she processed information without reaction. They had seen weapons before in many forms, and they knew what purpose looked like. As Vorth concluded his opening statement, he made one final declaration. "This human has shown us what her species is truly capable of when pushed to their limits. She is proof that humans are not the simple traders and explorers they pretend to be. They are a species of killers, and this one has perfected the art." The courtroom fell silent as all eyes turned to Maya Torres. She sat exactly as she had hours before, unchanged and unmoved by the accusations. But those who looked closely might have noticed something subtle. A slight shift in her posture, barely perceptible to most beings present. Maya had been listening to every word, cataloging every detail, and preparing for what would come next. The trial was just another problem to be solved, another obstacle to overcome. She had survived the Dominion's worst tortures, and now she would survive their justice system. The real question was not whether she was guilty, but whether the galaxy was ready to understand what they had created when they tried to break a human being and failed. The witness chair groaned under Champion Drex's massive weight as he settled into position. Even sitting, he towered over most beings in the courtroom, his natural armor plates catching the light like polished metal. 4 powerful arms ended, in claws that could slice through steel, and his reputation as the Iron Scale Coalition's greatest warrior was known throughout the galaxy. He had never lost a fight, never retreated from battle, never shown fear to any enemy, until he met Maya. Torres, the prosecutor, approached with obvious respect. Drex represented everything the Dominion admired: strength, honor, and absolute dedication to victory. His testimony would prove that the small human was far more dangerous than she appeared. "Champion Drex," Vorth began formally, "please tell the court about your encounter with the defendant on the night in question." Drex's yellow eyes swept the courtroom before settling on Maya. She sat in the same position as always, hands folded, staring straight ahead. Something about her stillness made his claws involuntarily extend. "I was conducting a security inspection of Research Level 7, Drex said, his voice a low rumble that needed no amplification. The facility had been experiencing minor technical problems, and my presence was requested to ensure everything remained secure. What he did not say was that the technical problems had been growing worse each day. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Security cameras developed blind spots. Motion sensors triggered randomly throughout the night. The scientists were getting nervous, and nervous scientists made mistakes. I was informed that one of the human test subjects had become unresponsive. Drex continued. The researchers believed she was dying and wanted permission to terminate the experiment early. I decided to inspect the specimen personally. The clinical language felt strange in his mouth. Drex had been a warrior since childhood, trained to respect worthy opponents and honor fallen enemies. But the Dominion scientists spoke of living beings like broken equipment, and he had learned to match their tone. Describe the defendant's condition when you first saw her, Vorth prompted. Drex shifted uncomfortably. She appeared to be unconscious. The humans had been subjected to various stress tests and pain tolerance studies. This one had been particularly resilient, lasting longer than most of her species before showing signs of psychological breakdown. The experiments had been brutal beyond description. Maya had been isolated, subjected to sensory deprivation, exposed to extreme temperatures, and forced to endure pain that would have killed most beings. The scientists documented every response, every adaptation, every limit they could find. She was secured to a medical chair in the center of her cell, Drex explained. Her eyes were closed, her breathing was minimal, and she showed no response to external stimuli. The researchers had declared her catatonic hours earlier. But Drex remembered something else about that moment, something that had made his warrior instincts twitch with unease. Despite her apparent unconsciousness, Maya's positioning had been too perfect. Her weight was balanced exactly right, her muscle tension minimal but ready, like a predator pretending to sleep. "What did you do next?" Vorth asked. I entered the cell to examine the specimen more closely. The restraints appeared to be functioning properly, but I wanted to confirm she was truly incapacitated before authorizing her termination. This was the part Drex hated most. As a warrior, he believed in honorable combat, in giving opponents a chance to fight back. But the broken creature in that chair had seemed beyond such considerations. He thought he was being merciful. I approached. "To check her vital signs," Drex continued, his voice growing quieter. "In my experience, unconscious beings still show some response to nearby movement. She showed nothing." The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the constant background chatter of translation systems seemed muted. Everyone wanted to hear what happened next. "I reached toward her neck to check for a pulse," Drex said slowly. "My hand was approximately 6 inches from her throat when she opened her eyes." The simple statement sent ripples through the gallery. Several species representatives leaned forward in their seats. Maya herself remained motionless, but somehow her stillness seemed more intense. "Describe what you saw," Vorth urged. Drex's claws scraped against the metal armrests of his chair. "Nothing. I saw nothing. No anger, no fear, no recognition of her situation. Her eyes were completely empty, like looking into deep space. But then," he paused, struggling with the memory. Champion Drex had faced armies, battled creatures twice his size, and stared death in the face countless times. But those empty human eyes had shown him something he had never encountered before. "Then she moved," Drex finished simply. "Can you describe how she moved?" No. The single word carried absolute finality. "I have fought for over 200 years. I have studied every known combat form in the galaxy. I understand speed, technique, leverage, and force application. What happened in that cell defied all of it." The defense lawyer looked up hopefully, sensing an opening. If the mighty champion Drex could not explain what happened, perhaps it could be dismissed as confusion or exaggeration. But Drex was not finished. "I remember reaching toward her," he said slowly. "I remember her eyes opening. The next thing I remember is waking up in the medical bay 3 hours later with 17 broken bones, internal bleeding, and complete system failure in my cybernetic enhancements. Medical records appeared on the courtroom's displays, showing the extent of Drex's injuries. His natural armor had been cracked in multiple places. His forearms had been broken with surgical precision. His spine showed stress fractures that should have been impossible to inflict without heavy machinery. The security footage shows a total duration of 3 seconds, Drex continued. In those 3 seconds, she somehow broke free of restraints, designed to hold beings 10 times her size, disabled me completely, and returned to her exact original position. The cameras never lost sight of her, yet they recorded nothing that explains what happened. Vorth nodded grimly. Champion, in your professional opinion as a warrior, how would you classify the defendant's actions? Drex looked directly at Maya for the first time since beginning his testimony. She had not moved, had not acknowledged his presence, had shown no reaction to his description of their encounter. But he could see something in her posture now that he had missed before. She was not fighting, Drex said quietly. Fighting implies emotion, intention, engagement with an opponent. What she did was more like problem-solving. I was an obstacle to be removed efficiently, nothing more. The admission sent shockwaves through the Iron Scale delegation. Their greatest champion was acknowledging not just defeat, but irrelevance. I have killed enemies in single combat. I have defeated challengers who sought glory by facing me. But this human did not see me as an enemy or a challenger, Drex continued. She saw me as a minor inconvenience to be handled with minimum effort. As he spoke, Drex realized the most disturbing truth of all. Maya had not been trying to hurt him. If she had wanted him dead, he would not have survived those 3 seconds. The injuries he suffered were precisely calibrated, enough to incapacitate him completely, but not enough to cause permanent damage. She had shown him mercy, and somehow that was more terrifying than any death threat. Champion Drex, Vorth concluded. Do you believe the defendant poses a continuing threat? Drex stared at Maya one final time. She sat exactly as she had throughout his entire testimony, unchanged and unmoved. But now he understood what he was looking at. This was not a broken victim or a traumatized child. This was a weapon waiting for its next target. Yes, Drex answered simply, but not in the way you think. Dr. Kem floated toward the witness stand in her specialized atmospheric bubble, her 6 eyes already scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. As one of the galaxy's leading experts in xenopsychology, she had studied thousands of species across dozens of worlds. But the human sitting silently at the defendant's table represented something entirely new in her centuries of research. The defense had called Dr. Kem as their expert witness, hoping her scientific credentials would provide a rational explanation for Maya's actions. What they did not expect was how her findings would challenge every assumption the galaxy held about human beings. Dr. Kem, the defense attorney began nervously, you have examined the defendant extensively. What is your professional assessment of her current mental state? The doctor's multiple eyes focused independently on different displays around the courtroom while she spoke. The defendant exhibits classic symptoms of selective mutism triggered by severe psychological trauma. However, her condition is far more complex than simple traumatic response. Brain scan imagery filled the air above the courtroom, showing the intricate neural patterns inside Maya's skull. To most observers, the colorful swirls and patterns meant nothing, but Dr. Kem saw something that had kept her awake for weeks. Human neural activity typically shows chaotic patterns during stress situations, Dr. Kem explained. Fear, anger, and confusion create electrical storms in the brain that interfere with optimal decision-making. But observe the defendant's scans. Maya's brain patterns appeared almost mechanical in their precision. Instead of the wild fluctuations expected from trauma, her neural activity showed perfectly organized waves of calculation and analysis. She is not broken, Dr. Kem stated firmly. She has adapted, The prosecutor objected immediately. This is speculation, not science. The defendant is clearly suffering from severe mental damage. Dr. Kem's eye stalks swiveled to face Vorth directly. I have spent 40 years studying traumatic stress across 17 different species. I know what mental damage looks like. This is not damage. This is evolution. The bold statement created an uproar in the gallery. Evolution was a slow process measured in thousands of years, not months of captivity. But Dr. Kem had prepared for this reaction. Humans are the only known species capable of entering what they call a flow state during extreme stress, she continued. In this state, conscious thought stops interfering with physical response. Time perception changes, awareness becomes absolute, performance increases beyond normal biological limits. Historical footage began playing on the courtroom displays, human athletes achieving impossible feats, soldiers surviving unsurvivable battles, ordinary people performing extraordinary actions under pressure. The gallery watched in fascination as humans pushed past every expected limitation. Most beings can access this state briefly, if at all, Dr. Kem explained. Humans can maintain it for hours, but the defendant has taken this ability to its ultimate conclusion. She gestured toward Maya, who continued sitting in perfect stillness. She has not experienced selective mutism. She has achieved selective consciousness. Speech, emotion, and unnecessary thought have been set aside in favor of pure survival processing. The implications were staggering. Dr. Kem was suggesting that Maya had not been broken by her ordeal, but had instead transcended normal human limitations in response to it. You're claiming she chose this condition? The defense attorney asked, uncertain whether this helped or hurt their case. I'm claiming her mind made the choice automatically, Dr. Kem replied. Humans have an unusual relationship with consciousness. They can compartmentalize trauma, suppress emotions, and focus their entire being on a single objective. The defendant's objective became very simple: survive at any cost. Brain chemistry analysis appeared on the displays, showing Maya's hormone and neurotransmitter levels. Where other beings showed elevated stress indicators, her levels were perfectly balanced for optimal performance. The experiments conducted on her by Dominion scientists were extensive and brutal, Dr. Kem continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. They subjected her to every form of physical and psychological torture they could devise, all while monitoring her responses. They thought they were studying a specimen. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. The Dominion had portrayed their actions as legitimate scientific research, but Dr. Kem was calling it what it really was. Instead, they were providing the most comprehensive survival training imaginable. Every torture technique taught her new methods of endurance. Every psychological attack showed her new ways to protect her mind. Every physical trial demonstrated new limits to surpass. Maya's medical record scrolled past on the displays, injuries that should have been permanently disabling, psychological traumas that should have destroyed her sanity, physical stresses that should have killed her outright. Yet she had not only survived everything, but had somehow grown stronger. The defendant did not break under this treatment because human consciousness has a remarkable ability to adapt, Dr. Kem explained. When normal coping mechanisms fail, humans can essentially rewrite their own mental programming to handle impossible situations. The prosecutor stood up angrily. You're suggesting that torture made her stronger? This is absurd pseudoscience. Dr. Kem's reply was ice cold. I am stating that your government's illegal experimentation on a minor created something unprecedented in galactic history. You wanted to understand human combat effectiveness. You succeeded beyond your worst nightmares. She activated a new set of displays showing Maya's current capabilities based on Dr. Kem's testing. Her reaction time was faster than most computer systems. Her spatial awareness covered a sphere of approximately 30 meters in all directions. Her threat assessment algorithms could identify and prioritize dozens of potential dangers simultaneously. The defendant's mind now processes reality as a constant tactical situation, Dr. Kem continued. Every person in this courtroom has been evaluated for threat potential, escape routes have been mapped, and contingency plans have been developed for numerous scenarios. She is not listening to our words. She is calculating probabilities. The gallery looked at Maya with new understanding. Her stillness was not emptiness, but perfect readiness. Her silence was not trauma, but focus. Her apparent fragility was camouflage for something far more dangerous. "Is she still human?" the defense attorney asked quietly. Dr. Kem considered the question carefully. "She retains all human physiology and basic psychology, but she has accessed a level of human potential that we previously believed was purely theoretical. She represents what humans might become under extreme selective pressure." The prosecutor was desperate now. "Even if we accept your wild theories, it does not excuse mass murder." "Mass murder implies malicious intent," Dr. Kem replied. "The defendant's actions were pure survival response. She was imprisoned, tortured, and threatened with execution. When Champion Drex entered her cell with clear intent to kill her, she responded with exactly enough force to neutralize the threat. Security footage played, showing the aftermath of Maya's escape. Bodies lay throughout the facility, but Dr. Kem highlighted details the prosecution had glossed over. Every injury was precisely calibrated. Guards were unconscious, not dead. Equipment was disabled, not destroyed. Alarms were triggered to alert rescue services. She could have killed everyone in that facility within minutes, Dr. Kem stated flatly. Instead, she created a path to freedom using minimum necessary force. That level of restraint while under extreme stress demonstrates remarkable ethical programming. The courtroom fell silent as the implications sank in. Maya Torres was not a mindless killer or a broken victim. She was something entirely new, a human being who had been pushed past every known limit and had emerged transformed. "Dr. Kem," the judge asked slowly, "in your professional opinion, can the defendant return to normal human consciousness?" All 6 of Dr. Kem's eyes turned to study Maya carefully. For the first time since her testimony began, she seemed uncertain. "I believe she retains the ability to choose," Dr. Kem said finally. "But the question is whether she will want to. She has seen what lies beyond normal human limitations. Would you choose to go back to being helpless after becoming invincible?" The prosecution's final gambit came as a surprise to everyone in the courtroom. Vorth had listened to Dr. Kem's testimony with growing frustration, watching his carefully constructed case crumble under scientific analysis. The expert witness had turned Maya from a terrorist into a victim, from a monster into a marvel of human adaptation. But he had one last card to play. "Your Honor," Vorth announced, rising to his full imposing height, "the prosecution requests a practical demonstration of the defendant's alleged capabilities." The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Several species representatives stood to object, while others demanded to know what he meant. The defense attorney shot to his feet, stammering protests, but Vorth continued speaking over the chaos. "We have heard theories and speculation about human potential," the prosecutor declared. "We have listened to explanations of brain scans and psychological profiles, but the jury deserves to see the truth with their own eyes." Judge Elder Nix, ancient even by her species' standards, called for order with a gesture that somehow commanded absolute silence. Her crystalline form shifted colors as she considered the unprecedented request. "Prosecutor Vorth, what exactly are you proposing?" she asked in a voice like wind chimes. "A controlled demonstration, Your Honor. One volunteer from our security. Forces against the defendant under strict supervision with non-lethal parameters. If she is truly as dangerous as Dr. Kem claims, it should be easily proven. If she is simply a traumatized child who got lucky, then this charade can end." The proposal was legally questionable at best. Defendants were not required to prove their innocence through combat trials. But the political pressure was enormous. Too many species wanted answers about human capabilities, and the Dominion's reputation was on the line. Ambassador Rice stood up in the gallery, her face pale with horror. "Your Honor, Maya Torres is 17 years old and has been through unimaginable trauma. This request is barbaric." But Vorth pressed his advantage. "The defendant stands accused of destroying a military installation and defeating our greatest champion. If she cannot demonstrate the abilities Dr. Kim described, then we must assume her actions were the result of some other factor, perhaps hidden weapons or external assistance." The implication was clear. If Maya could not prove she was individually dangerous, the prosecution would argue that humans must have used advanced technology or coordinated attacks to achieve their recent military successes. It would justify increased restrictions and surveillance on all human activities in Dominion space. Judge Nix considered carefully. The legal precedent was questionable, but the political ramifications were enormous. Half the galaxy wanted to understand human capabilities, while the other half wanted to dismiss them as luck or deception. "The court will allow a limited demonstration," she finally announced. "Single combat, non-lethal parameters with full medical monitoring and immediate intervention protocols." Maya's restraints were removed for the first time since her arrest. She stood slowly, her movements careful and controlled. The simple gray jumpsuit hung loose on her small frame, making her look even younger and more vulnerable than usual. A volunteer stepped forward from the Dominion security detail, a massive warrior named Kor who stood nearly 9 feet tall and weighed over 400 pounds. His powered armor gleamed under the courtroom lights, and his energy weapon was calibrated to stun rather than kill. He was eager to restore his military's honor by easily subduing the silent human girl. The center of the courtroom was cleared, creating a circular arena about 30 feet in diameter. Force field barriers activated to protect the observers, and medical teams stood ready with emergency equipment. Hundreds of recording devices focused on Maya as she walked to the center of the space. For the first time in months, Maya Torres opened her mouth and spoke. "I don't want to hurt anyone else." Her voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the silent courtroom. The simple statement sent chills through the gallery, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. There was no emotion, in her words, no plea for mercy or expression of fear. It was simply a statement of fact. The prosecutor laughed harshly. "Another deception, Your Honor. The defendant is trying to appear weak and innocent." Kor activated his armor systems, weapons powering up with electronic whines. His helmet display showed Maya as a minimal threat. Small size, no visible weapons, no armor protection. His combat computer recommended a simple, stunning blast followed by physical restraint. "Begin when ready," Judge Nix announced. Kor advanced confidently, raising his stun weapon. Maya stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, her eyes closed, hands at her sides. She looked like a child playing statue, completely defenseless against the armored giant approaching her. The courtroom held its breath. What happened next lasted exactly 1.7 seconds according to the recording systems, but most observers would swear it took much longer. Maya opened her eyes and moved. She did not run toward Kor or away from him. She did not dodge or weave or attempt any recognizable combat maneuver. Instead, she simply changed position, and suddenly Kor's weapon was in her hand, completely, disassembled into its component parts. The armored warrior stood frozen in confusion, his gauntlet still raised in firing position but now empty. Maya held the weapon's power core delicately in one hand, while the other components scattered across the arena floor. She had not moved more than 3 steps from her starting position. Kor's combat computer screamed warnings that made no sense. His armor registered 17 simultaneous impact points, but the damage readings were impossible. His weapon systems showed complete failure, but the diagnostic programs could not identify what had gone wrong. Then Maya moved again. This time observers could almost follow her actions, though the speed was still inhuman. She flowed around cores, massive form like water around a stone, her small hands finding precise points on his armor. Magnetic clamps released, power couplings disconnected, and structural supports failed in a cascade of mechanical failures. Core collapsed as his powered armor shut down completely, leaving him conscious but helpless inside several 100 pounds of inert metal. His communications were dead, his weapons were offline, and his mobility was reduced to whatever movement he could manage through sheer muscle power. Maya stepped back and gently placed the weapon's power core on the judge's bench. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages, security teams activated emergency protocols, and medical staff rushed toward the arena. But Maya simply walked back to the defendant's table and sat down in her usual position. Dr. Kem's equipment had recorded everything, and the data was already being analyzed by computer systems throughout the courthouse. Maya's movements showed perfect efficiency, no wasted motion, no unnecessary force, no emotional response to the situation. Judge Nix called for order, but it took several minutes for the uproar to subside. When quiet finally returned, all eyes turned to Maya, who sat exactly as she had before the demonstration. Nothing about her had changed, except that now everyone understood what they were looking at. Ambassador Rice was the first to speak. "Your Honor, I think we have our answer." Prosecutor Vorth stood amid the wreckage of his case, staring at Core's disabled armor. His volunteer was uninjured but completely helpless, defeated by a 17-year-old girl who had apologized for winning. But the most disturbing part was Maya's absolute lack of satisfaction or triumph. She had not enjoyed the combat or taken pride in her abilities. She had simply solved a problem with minimum necessary effort, then returned to waiting for the next challenge. The demonstration had proven Dr. Kem's theories beyond doubt. Maya. Torres was no longer just human. She was something humanity might become when pushed beyond every conceivable limit, and she was still just getting started. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, as Judge Nix prepared to render her verdict. The ancient being had presided over thousands of cases across centuries of service, but nothing had prepared her for Maya Torres. The crystalline formations that made up her body shifted through colors that had no names in most languages, reflecting the complexity of her thoughts. Maya sat exactly as she had throughout the entire trial, hands folded, posture perfect, eyes staring straight ahead. The demonstration had changed everything for the observers, but she seemed completely unaffected by the chaos she had caused. If anything, she appeared even more still than before, like a statue carved from living flesh. "Before this court renders judgment," Judge Nix began, her voice carrying the weight of millennia, "I must address what we have witnessed here. This case began as a simple matter of crime and punishment. It has become something far more significant. The gallery remained silent, hanging on every word. Representatives from dozens of species had seen their assumptions about humans shattered in the space of a few hours. The small, quiet girl before them represented a paradigm shift in galactic politics. The evidence clearly shows that the defendant acted in self-defense against illegal imprisonment and torture," the judge continued. "Her actions, while devastating in their scope, were proportional to the threat she faced and showed remarkable restraint, given her capabilities." Prosecutor Vorth slumped in his seat, knowing his case was lost. But Judge Nix was not finished. However, this court must also address the broader implications of what we have learned. The defendant represents something unprecedented in our understanding of sentient development under extreme stress. Maya's breathing remained steady and controlled, but those who watched closely might have noticed a slight shift in her posture. For the first time since the trial began, she seemed to be actively listening rather than simply processing ambient information. "Maya Torres," the judge said, addressing her directly. "This court finds you not guilty of all charges by reason of justified self-defense. Furthermore, this court formally censures the Dominion for their illegal experimentation on sentient beings." The gallery erupted in mixed reactions. The human diplomatic mission showed obvious relief, while Dominion representatives sat in stunned silence. But Judge Nix raised a crystalline appendage for continued quiet. "However, before you are released, this court has questions that transcend legal jurisdiction. The galaxy has seen what you have become, child of Earth. We need to understand what this means for all of us." Maya turned her head slightly, the first voluntary movement she had made in months. Her dark eyes focused on the ancient judge with an intensity that made several observers step backward involuntarily. "Can you speak?" Judge Nix asked gently. Maya considered the question for a long moment, as if weighing the value of words against silence. When she finally responded, her voice carried clearly through the hushed courtroom. "Yes." The single word contained volumes of meaning. It was not just confirmation of her ability to communicate, it was acknowledgement that she had chosen silence, and now was choosing to break it. "Tell us, child, can you return from where your trauma has taken you?" Maya's response came after a pause that seemed to stretch into eternity. "I remember who I was before. I remember my family, my dreams, my favorite songs, but I also remember every second of what they did to me." Her voice remained emotionless, but the words themselves carried a weight that pressed down on everyone present. She was not just recounting facts. She was revealing the cost of her transformation. "I remember every way they tried to break me and every method I developed to survive them. I can choose to be the girl I was, but I will always be the weapon they made me." The admission sent chills through the assembled representatives. Maya was not claiming to be fixed or healed. She was stating that she contained both versions of herself simultaneously. "My species has a saying," Maya continued, her gaze shifting to encompass the entire courtroom. "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You tried to understand what makes humans dangerous in combat. You took a 17-year-old girl who wanted to be a musician and turned her into something that can end wars with her bare hands." The Dominion delegation shifted uncomfortably as her words hit home. They had indeed wanted to study human combat effectiveness, and they had succeeded beyond their worst nightmares. "Every species that thinks humans are just clever animals should remember what you learned," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "We don't want to be your enemies. We want to explore, to learn, to make music and art, and discover beautiful things." For just a moment, the scared teenager she had once been showed through the perfect weapon she had become. Ambassador Rice wiped tears from her eyes, remembering the bright young woman who had joined their cultural exchange mission. "But if you insist on making us into weapons," Maya gestured toward the still disabled core, "this is what your weapons look like." The threat was not delivered with anger or malice. It was simply a statement of fact. Maya had demonstrated that humans possessed capabilities far beyond what the galaxy had imagined, and she was making it clear that these abilities could be replicated. "The experiments your scientists conducted were comprehensive," she continued, looking directly at Vorth. "They documented every technique they used, every response they recorded, every limit they pushed. That data still exists." The implications were staggering. If other humans were subjected to the same treatment Maya had endured, they might undergo similar transformations. The Dominion's torture protocols could become a training manual for creating superhuman weapons. "But here is what your data cannot tell you," Maya said, standing for the first time without being directed. "I chose to survive. I chose to adapt. I chose to become something new rather than let them destroy me." She walked slowly toward the center of the courtroom, every movement fluid and controlled. Security personnel tensed, but she made no threatening gestures. Humans are not naturally warriors, she explained. We are naturally stubborn. We refuse to accept that anything is impossible. We find ways around every obstacle, solutions to every problem, hope in every darkness. The gallery listened in fascination as Maya revealed the true nature of human resilience. It was not physical strength or natural aggression that made them dangerous. It was their absolute refusal to surrender. You wanted to know what makes us effective in combat, Maya said, her voice now carrying to every corner of the vast courtroom. It is not our bodies or our technology. It is our certainty that there must be a way to win, even when logic says otherwise. She paused in the exact center of the arena where she had defeated Kor. But now her presence seemed different, less threatening, more educational. I survived your worst tortures because I believed survival was possible. I defeated your champion because I refused to accept that victory was impossible. I escaped your most secure facility because I could not believe that freedom was beyond reach. Judge Nix leaned forward, her crystalline form brightening with interest. Are you saying that other humans could achieve what you have achieved? Maya's smile was the first genuine emotion she had shown since her capture. Your Honor, you have seen what one human can become when pushed past every limit. But you should know that I was never special among my people. I was not a soldier or an athlete or a genius. The simple statement sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. If Maya represented average human potential, what could exceptional humans achieve? I was a music student who liked painting and worried about passing chemistry class, she continued. If you can transform someone like me into something like this, imagine what you could create from humans who were already extraordinary. The warning was clear. Maya Torres was not unique. She was a proof of concept. Humanity possessed capabilities that had barely been explored, let alone understood. This court grants you full diplomatic immunity and safe passage home to Earth, Judge Nix announced formally. But before you go, do you have any final words for this assembly? Maya looked around the courtroom one last time, her gaze touching every species present. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen the absolute depths of cruelty and emerged stronger. We came to your worlds in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship. Some of you welcomed us, and we are grateful. Others saw us as threats to be contained or specimens to be studied. Her expression hardened slightly as she looked at the Dominion representatives. To those who would harm humans, remember this trial. Remember what happened when you tried to break. One small girl who just wanted to make music. Ask yourselves what you might create if you threaten our families, our children, our worlds. The silence stretched until Maya turned toward the exit. But to those who would stand with us as friends and equals, she added, her voice warming, remember that the same stubbornness that makes us dangerous also makes us loyal. The same refusal to surrender that helps us survive torture also means we never abandon our allies. As Maya walked toward the courtroom doors, Ambassador Rice rose to escort her home. But the gallery remained seated, processing everything they had witnessed. The trial of Maya Torres was over, but its implications would echo through galactic politics for generations. The quiet human girl had spoken at last, and the universe would never be quite the same. The age of underestimating humanity had ended.